Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV.
All right. Hey guys, welcome to the Kids in the Room podcast. Today we've got Adeena Mignogna on the actual show. Did I say that right or did I butcher it?
Close. It was very, very close.
Mignona.
Mignona.
Adeena Mignogna. All right, cool. So what's going on? Tell us about yourself. What do you do? What's your magic, specialty?
Yeah. Sure. Well, I'm a sort of a scientist and engineer. I have some, degrees in science, but I spend my days working on satellites, and I spend my nights, really, really early, super early mornings writing science fiction. And I've written a book called Crazy Foolish Robots. And I love talking about science and science fiction with anybody who will talk to me about that stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you work as what again? Say that one more time.
I'm an engineer in aerospace. I work on satellites.
That is amazing. How did you get in that?
Well, it's something that I always wanted to do since I was really young. I grew up in the 80s. So those of us who are from the 80s remember all the space shuttle missions and getting really excited about that. And I was. And so I wanted to, partly because of my love of just what was going on in the space, and partly because of my love of science fiction, I wanted to go into the space industry and do cool things. And so that the short version of the story is that's what I did. The long version of the story is like all the, academic hurdles and the different jobs I had, to get there.
Right. So you, the academic hurdles. So you work on satellites, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you work on satellites, and how did you begin to be able to work on satellites? I'm still trying to gravitate towards that logic of like, I'm a kid. Yeah. I grew up in the 80s and I wanted to work on satellites. Like, how do we get there?
Well, think about some of the missions that have like always been in the news, or at least when I was a kid were in the news, like Hubble Space Telescope. Hubble launched when I was in high school. So that's, some big, fantastic satellite. And then we also had sent Magellan. That was a mission to Venus. And of course, they were planning some of the early Mars missions. So I was aware of that. And that was kind of the stuff that I thought that I wanted to do. And I got very lucky in a few different ways. While I was earning my degree, I did get to work on stuff that we were building that was going to go in space. I was working on different science instruments for NASA missions. And then immediately after college, I thought I was going to go to graduate school right away, but about 2 months before graduating, I woke up in a panic attack. Like, oh my God, I can't go to graduate school right now. I can't deal with 2 more years of classroom work. I need to go out and work. But then I was like, oh my God, I need a job. And I didn't know the first thing about really looking for like a real job in the real world, and wound up taking the first one that was offered to me, which was to do satellite operations at Goddard Space Flight Center. So if you've ever watched, if anyone's seen on TV, you see like a launch, like a shuttle launch, or even in the movies, you see something where you see a room of people and like rows of computers. So those are the operators. And that was what I did originally when I first graduated from school. And then from there, just kind of moved back into like, well, how do we build this stuff? And I've spent most of my career doing like software parts of that. Making the software that they use to control the satellites, and then working on the satellites themselves, which is what I do now.
Amazing. So you work on the software. Are you an engineer or a developer? Or like what kind of software do you work on? How are you working on that?
Yeah. So it's a combination of things. Like my original degree from school was in physics, but I always programmed. I was that kid who happened to have a computer and happened to learn how to program. And yeah, I wound up doing that for many years, but then eventually got a computer science master's degree. But that was like long after I had been already doing the work. But these days I'm not doing programming so much anymore. That's just because I've gotten older, and I now lead teams. So I really help the team of people get stuff done as opposed to do it myself. So I don't actually program a lot, hands on keyboard myself anymore. And right now I'm what we call the lead systems engineer of the satellite mission I work on, which really means is I help keep it all together, and I help make sure all the 60, 70 people who are working on the overall satellite, they're all working together towards the same goal with knowing the same stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So you started out, and you were obviously during that time there weren't that many women that would probably say that were in
Hmm.
the actual field that you're in. How did you deal with that? Like, what was that like?
It it's weird because it wasn't for me a thing. It was, it was obvious that a lot of the time I was the only woman in the room. I was the only technical woman in the room. That was most of my career up until the last couple of years. That was true. And for me, I'm very fortunate in that I worked with some great people, and it wasn't a big deal. No one cared. Like, they knew what I brought to the table, and that was really what was all that was important. And I'm very fortunate because I have friends of mine in other companies, locations, things that were not as fortunate as me and ran into a lot of issues along the way. So for me, it was just, okay, this is just the way it is. And a lot of my friends had always been guys too, I guess, because we shared similar interests. So like I said, I was very lucky that I didn't run into any particular roadblocks. But these days, it's wonderful because it's very much opened up, and we've got everybody, and it's exciting because there's a lot of new people and new ideas and new visions and just new ways of doing things or thinking about things that are all coming in, which is fantastic. Because yeah, so now I work with everybody because now there is everybody.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So you got in this, and earlier on, and where you are right now, you're building satellites, and then you also work on robots, or like, how does that, because you said you had a book, right, about robots?
Mhm.
Yeah, what
Well,
is
the
that?
book, it's a science fiction novel, and with featuring a lot of robots, because in addition to space, robots is one of my other technical loves. Although I maintain that a satellite really is a robot in space. If we think of a robot as something that we basically program to go out and do something for us, that is what a satellite. That is what a satellite is. We have the Hubble Space Telescope. We've programmed it to go out and take pictures, and we might update that program every day or several times a day. Take a picture here, take a picture there, but that's really what it is. It's a robot in space. So yeah, so I've had a love of robots for pretty much my entire life, and that extends to I do some hobbies with robots. Of course, again, my work being with satellites, which again I maintain are robots, and then so in science fiction, I love I love reading about robots, watching them. From Star Wars, R2D2 and C3PO were my first robot loves, and so then yep, I love writing about them too.
That's amazing. Writing about robots, love
Mhm.
and robots. Do you believe there's going to be love and robots between humans and
I don't
and and
know.
and, and, and
It's
yeah?
that's a long, long way away, if ever.
Love and robots. That sounds like a new reality TV show. Yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
yeah.
Probably get picked up by MTV. Yeah. So so like, are you also interested in like, because like I guess what I'm saying is like, really I want to take a steps back,
Mhm,
and right now, who do you work for? A satellite company? Do you work for
mhm.
NASA? Like, who do you work for? Can you say
So
that? Yeah.
I can say I work for Northrop Grumman, which most people know. Northrop Grumman is a large, defense contractor, and Northrop does a ton of stuff. The way I worked for them was actually the company I had worked previously. We were acquired by Northrop a couple years ago. So the company I used to work for, we pretty much did satellites and rockets, and now we do it under the umbrella of Northrop Grumman. And so, if anytime anyone sees us in the news with related to the space stuff that we do, we are one of the companies that send supplies to the International Space Station a few times a year, which is awesome. We are also the company that built the James Webb Space Telescope, which is one of the replacements to Hubble that's launching later this year, which I'm very, very, very excited about that. It's going to be a fantastic mission. And then the mission that I work on right now is about satellite servicing. There are a lot of satellites up there, and it's becoming more cost efficient to service it rather than completely replace it. A lot of the satellites that are part of our day-to-day life that we don't really think about are the ones that provide, a lot of our communication services. And they're up there. We built them for like to last for 10 or 15 years, and the big thing that limits them is how much fuel they can carry because they need fuel to stay in their position. Well, it's becoming more cost efficient to send a little satellite up to attach it to the satellite and basically extend its life by having more fuel. And so that's the kind of stuff that I work on right now.
They don't use like a solar power. Like, why do they need fuel?
They do. I mean, so they do. The solar power is how they just get power, but the fuel is so if you have a satellite that needs to stay where it is in its position, it has thrusters, and the thrusters keep it from moving because if you don't do anything, it'll drift out of alignment. It'll drift off to where somewhere else. So it actually it's thrusters that keep it in its little box of where it should be.
Right. That's awesome. So how does a satellite stay within the, the vicinity of the, Earth, without it like
Okay.
just drifting off? Is it only because of the rockets? Like, how does that happen?
Well, so that's a great question, and to start to understand that it really is all about gravity and orbits and where a satellite is. One of the I think the easiest ways to think about it a little bit is the International Space Station, which is really only a couple hundred miles above the surface of the Earth, and it's in literally in orbit and it needs thrusters too so it doesn't we're not worried about them flying off. We're worried about them coming, like their orbit getting too low and re-entering the atmosphere. So a lot of satellites in what we call low earth orbit, we keep those thrusters to keep the orbit, to keep them, from degrading, to keep it from, coming down into the atmosphere and burning up.
Wow.
uh, So, but that's just one type of orbit and one kind of type of thing that we have to consider. A lot of other missions are what we call geosynchronous satellites, and those are the ones that give us, our direct TV or dish TV or communications, and some of our weather satellites. And they're at a location much further out. They're still technically they're in orbit around Earth, but such that if I'm, let's say I'm standing, well, I live in Maryland, and so I'm here, and let's say from here I can see one of these satellites. From my position, it looks like that satellite isn't moving, although it's moving the same way, the Earth is rotating. That satellite is rotating at the same rate as we are. So it looks like from here that it's staying put. But in order to really stay put, like I said, we need a little bit of that thruster to keep it where it is. Because if we did nothing, there's other forces. There's solar wind that would actually have enough pressure to move it around and stuff. So it's very complicated. There's all different kinds of orbits that different satellites are in. There's, I just talked about two of the most common, but there's like really like elongated orbits and other kinds of crazy orbits.
Why do you need different, types of orbits? Why not just one?
Well, some of the low Earth orbits means that if you need to be close down. Let's say some of the missions I used to work on were ones that take pictures of the Earth, and well, we need that camera to be kind of close to get a good picture, and you want it to be able to get um, the way we go around the Earth is so you can get pictures of any part of the planet over the course of a couple days. You can't do that from far out, but from far out, the geosynchronous ones, you can. If I'm that satellite, if I'm like that satellite TV satellite, then I can actually see like all of North America from the vantage point as opposed to just a teeny little bit. So there's, depending on the satellite, there's different reasons. A lot of science missions need to be a little further away from the Earth to just get away from Earth. James Webb Telescope will be one of those. Uh, Earth is a big light source and heat source and all this for satellites, and you want to get away from that. Some missions, so it's all mission dependent. There's so many different reasons.
Wow. That's pretty deep. So when we're thinking about, space travel and, fuel, how does any of your work, how does it kind of connect with any of the future types of explorations that we plan when it comes to like Mars and, the moon's occupation, right?
Mhm. Yeah, so not I'm personally not working on these projects, but my company, Northrop Grumman, along with a lot of other space companies, we are all doing different, helping to implement NASA's vision for the return to moon to go to the Mars. They have a new space station that they're planning, and so several companies, including mine, are part of that. And so yeah, so we're going to be, I would just say generally, a part of anything that goes into the future like that, especially, with NASA, which is also a big international effort as well. NASA is very committed to, this isn't just a US thing. This is an everybody thing. um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So now that we're talking about, we've got we've got uh we've got these, NASA's getting involved more with the this with more the future space occupation of like Mars and Moon and things like that. I thought NASA was out of the game. I thought it was just Tesla's, I mean,
Nope.
sorry,
Nope.
SpaceX. Excuse me, did I say that? Sorry, SpaceX and
Yeah.
what was and also Richard Branson's company and
Hmm.
Jeff Bezos' company.
Hmm. Yep. No, it's everybody, which is fantastic because, you know, it's expensive for the government to do this, of course. So the fact that we also have these other companies that they're willing to spend their own money to also advance the technology and help push us, I'm all for all of it. And I think there's literally space for everybody. Because there's just so many different things to do and to see. And I think we help each other because there's all kinds of technology that needs to get invented. And I think just so much going into it. I like to think that all of this is motivating. I'm hoping that, the folks that are, like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and might start be thinking about, well, what am I going to do with my life? I'm hoping that any of this gets them excited into the possibilities for the future. And again, whether it's through a completely private commercial company like SpaceX or Blue, or whether it's through NASA. I mean, there's so much to do. There's so much to consider in all kinds of different fields. Like I mentioned, I've really focused on a lot of the software in my career, but there's all kinds of engineering and beyond even the very technical engineering stuff to make this all work. There's everything else. I mean, we have accountants, right? We have everyone else who's helping us get this done. And the more people that are excited about doing it, I don't want just an accountant working on my project. I want the accountant who's also excited that this is space, right?
Yeah. So, what are some of the things that are needed to be solved? You mentioned some
Oh
things that need to
gosh.
be solved. What are some of them?
I think one of the big ones is just how are humans going to survive? One of the big challenges is out in space, there's a lot of radiation. And how are they going to survive the radiation? I think that's probably one of the biggest ones. Uh, Others that
What are some of the
I'm aware.
problems that may have stop us from surviving? Like, what are the limitations of some of those? Can you mention some of those before you dig into the other stuff?
Um, so this is where I'm not a super expert in, this is going into more of the biological and human medical stuff that is a little bit outside my area of expertise, but, radiation will kill us. Radiation does cause cancer and does cause all kinds of bad things to happen to our bodies. So, yeah, that's the level of my knowledge. Radiation is bad.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, well, I guess going like, what are some of the other
Mhm.
problems that kind of high level that you need to solve besides that? Since I know you're not like an expert
Oh,
in a
sure, sure.
biological perspective, so yeah.
Some of the other ones are definitely a little bit easier for me to talk about. One of the big ones I think is just having enough, power on Mars. Where so here, right? We do use things like solar arrays and such, but to really generate a good quantity of power, when you're out at Mars, you're much further from the sun than you are here. And so the amount of sunlight you get, it's just less. And then down on Mars itself, you're in a different atmosphere than we are here. So again, that all interferes with how much sunlight we're getting. So the same like solar panel that I might have here on my lawn and then my back, or on my roof isn't going to generate the same amount of power on Mars. So we still have a lot of work to do in those kinds of technologies to make it good and efficient. And yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's a
interesting.
lot to, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, we have some power issues on Mars. We also have some other
Hmm.
thing about like, I think we talked about well, I think there's some talk about like how do we make Mars or terraform Mars, to be closer to our planet,
Well, and then there's going to be the debate: should we terraform Mars? I mean, like, is that the thing that we should really be doing? There's definitely going to be people who think, "Yep, let's terraform Mars," and there are going to be people who think, "No, we need to leave Mars as is. It's not necessarily our place to terraform it." So, and this is one of the things where I really like the intersection of science and science fiction, because then we can think like really beyond this, where Mars is really within our reach. We're gonna absolutely see people on Mars in our lifetime, and we might even see like a little colony on Mars, start in our lifetime. But I'm a firm believer that to make real, I guess, advancement or progress in becoming a species that lives beyond Earth, we do need to go further outside our solar system and look for other planets, and look for not necessarily terraform a planet, because that might just be too much effort, but look for another planet that could support us naturally. And then to me, this is where then it's fun to think about that in science fiction, but then we'll hopefully motivate the next generation or two of people to go out there and make it happen. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. But space is scary, man. It's
Yeah.
scary. Never been, but I can understand. When I first got on an airplane, there was this weird feeling where it's like you look down and everybody's really just ants.
Hmm.
People really aren't as big as we think we are. And then you start thinking like, well, shit, do we matter really? Do we
Yeah.
really matter that much as we think we matter? Like, I don't know. You start second thinking everything you thought of in your life, because in your
Hmm.
body and in your, when you're within yourself, you feel bigger, even when you're walking
Hmm.
around. But then when you're up in the sky, you're on an airplane, you're looking down, you're really like, well, shit, man. I mean, we're really not that. I don't know, man. Are we important? I don't know, man. I don't know. It's kind of I don't know.
It
It
can get very depressing if you go along those lines of thoughts too much. But yeah, but there's a lot of scary things out there. I mean, I've been out on, you think about being out in the ocean. It's kind of in
it's
some ways the
similar.
same thing. You look out and you see nothing anywhere, and it's very isolating, and it's very powerful, because the ocean can kill you.
Or something else in there can kill you. The difference
Or
is
something in the ocean can get, yeah,
right.
there's a lot of scary things out there.
Yeah, I mean, and we haven't, and you work on satellites.
Mhm.
Have you guys ever found anything that was, interesting, right? Something that was different that you guys couldn't really figure out what the hell is this?
Mm, not in not in my own direct experience. No, not really. Because from what I'm doing, we're doing pretty straightforward engineering. We're not doing
No pictures,
research
no
or that
pictures,
kind of
no
things.
no pictures of aliens, no nothing,
No, no pictures of
nothing,
aliens.
no
No,
three men with five arms. I mean, you know,
no,
nothing,
no.
no good stuff.
But those are all great science fiction stories.
Ah, so would you say that that the aliens might be science fiction?
uh, no, I'm definitely a believer that somewhere out there in the humongous universe that we live in, humongous galaxy and the humongous universe, there is something out there. Whether or not that something is related to us, or not related, I mean similar enough that we could actually possibly have a conversation or relate to them in some way. Whether or not we'll find out in my lifetime, we probably won't. Something is out there.
Something is out
I
there.
think it was Carl. Well, yeah, I think it was a Carl Sagan who liked to say, in the movie Contact and in the book Contact, if it's just us, then this is a big waste of space.
Right.
And I like that. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just us, this is a big waste of space. But at the same
Hmm.
time, if it's just if it's just not us, or if it is just us, like why have it is such a waste of space if there is something like that. But also, like, why would we exist out of everything else?
I don't know. That's why I don't think it's just us.
It just doesn't make sense. The more you keep on digging,
Hmm.
it goes in a loop of
Hmm.
circle of like, well, what the hell's going on? You
Yeah.
know? I think that's why
Yeah.
I like Earth, right? Because Earth just seems
Mhm.
simple. And the more you think about things, and the more you feed yourself more information, the more you start questioning everything, and you just end up with these roadblocks because
Mhm.
you're like, okay, so let's say, we go to, Mars,
Mhm.
and, we try to terraform that. Then we need to go to another planet and we need to do this and we need to do that. And then you start thinking like, well, shit, now we're on Mars, were we ever on Mars, previously in the past, and we just screwed up Mars and just terraformed Earth? I mean, and then we forgot everything,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever might have possibly could have happened in the past. Some people just left. I mean, you can go wild about it if you really want to think
Mm-hmm.
about it. Like, I mean, you grew
Yep.
up you grew up in the 80s. You probably watched some 80s cartoons like Thundercats, and they had
Mm-hmm.
similar like plots like that. And it's like, how far is that is like from fiction of some sense? Like, I know we don't see any
Mm-hmm.
buildings and things like that on Mars. We haven't discovered anything else like that. But like, if a civilization did live there, it probably would have been millions, or maybe even, if possible, humans could live billions of years ago. It could have been that far back. And like, would
Mm-hmm.
anything even be shown, or would there be any evidence of anything by now?
Maybe not. Maybe that's why there doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, I always think, could we have screwed up Mars? Could we have already screwed up Mars and said, oh fuck, we need to go to Mars, we need to go to this other planet called Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and then we just ditched
It
it,
is
and
possible.
yeah, we screwed it
Yeah.
up because
Yep.
it had it had oceans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had stuff before, so it's
Yep.
like, what the hell happened?
Mm-hmm. So we shouldn't do it again.
If we know that ever happened. So I think that's always debate, if we knew that really happened or if it didn't happen. But we have like, our ancestors who talk about, coming from the stars, who say they traveled from different, universes and things like that within our galaxies. Right. So it's like, could things like that possibly could have happened in the past? Could there be some weird thing where we've been like, I don't know, just these apes, and, DNA was changed. We just took some markers out and switched it up and turned it on like a trigger. I mean, because
Mm-hmm.
there's even like I was reading literally the other day that there was a unique gene that some scientists said they believed that humans used to have tails, but it was due
Mm-hmm.
to a mutation within a gene. I forgot the name. It was a BX or something like that. I forgot the actual gene name, but they said due to a mutation in the gene, we stopped producing it.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore we don't have tails. And they based this off of some monkeys and some cats and things like that who had this actual gene. And they noticed that when they kept on procreating, sometimes it can become somewhat dominant, and then it just totally,
Mm-hmm.
now you have a species that doesn't have the tail anymore.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I would have liked to have a tail. That would have been fun.
But see, this goes back to Thundercats again, right? This goes back to Thundercats. See, maybe
Sure.
we were Thundercats, right?
Maybe.
And we had
But
tails.
wouldn't it be great to have a tail? It'd be like, I picture it like a third hand,
Okay.
right? Because it would be great to have a third hand.
Unless something just said, hey, you know what? There's these primates. We think it's not efficient for them to have these tails. Let's take that away.
Mm-hmm.
Let's increase the brain capacity, to think more logical. Yeah. Let's trigger this. I mean, because DNA is so amazing, because you can turn on things,
Mm-hmm.
There are, certain species within our planet that can, rejuvenate, but we can't.
Mm-hmm.
But we must
Right.
have the gene that's capable of it. All we have to do is figure out pretty much how to turn it on.
Right.
It's like
And
a
that's
Rubik's
one of the
Cube.
reasons why I wish I knew a little bit more about the biological scientists, because that stuff is completely fascinating.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's super fascinating. Biology, and then also the whole robotics. I think like a
Mm-hmm.
happy marriage between both of those can produce some really cool shit.
Cyborgs.
Yeah, there you go. I
And
mean,
we
but
have cyborgs.
but if you look at it though, right? We are pretty much a cyborg, right? More of
Mhm.
like a biological cyborg, right? If you want to say that, right? I mean, everything is just so perfectly well put together.
Mhm. Well, a lot of years to figure it out, probably.
Yeah, all we're doing is reversing it,
Yeah.
Even when we're thinking about computers, we're building them similar to humans, how we have temporary memory like cookies, we're building them have long-term memory, right? Like our hard drive.
To the degree that we know, I think that's kind of one of the interesting things is we don't, there's still so much about the brain that we still don't know, right? We still don't have a great framework for even just how the brain truly works. So we think that we're building them similarly, but maybe not. And maybe that's why, true artificial intelligence is really a long way off
Level 5
from where we are.
Level 5,
Yeah.
full autonomy. Yeah. I mean, but do we need to have this level of of AI that is just like completely like a human brain, or do we need to have it just close enough to do mundane things?
Mhm. Well, I would love to have an assistant that was a little bit more sophisticated than Alexa or Siri, that could kind of anticipate my needs. So that's kind of like the level that I'm going for. You know, a human can anticipate my needs and put things together in a way that the today's kind of like AI assistants, you know, can't do. The example I like to do is like several years ago, I was traveling a lot for work, and I would always go from one airport to another. This one airport was my home airport, and that's where I traveled from. Even though I'm in the range of 3 different airports, there was just one I always traveled to. So one day I'm supposed to go to my sister's wedding. So I get up, I'm rushing, I go to the airport. And I thought it was weird that I was having problems checking in online before I left the house. But I'm like, no, I just got to get there. You know, I don't have time to worry about it. I'll figure it out once I get to the airport. I get to the airport, and as I'm walking towards the terminal, I'm like, oh my God, it hit me. I went to the wrong airport. I had bought the tickets months before, and in kind of like just the way life had gotten so chaotic, and because I was so used to going to the one airport, the concept that I could possibly do something at another one, I just didn't think about. So I was on kind of autopilot. And I like to think that some kind of sophisticated AI in my computer would have kind of like been able to put up a big red flag and said, you know, Adina, I know you normally go to one airport, but no, today you need to go to another one. Like I need something that will think a little bit more for me, if that makes sense. And
Right.
the funny thing is, as I'm saying, I've been telling this story for like a while because this happened 12, 13 years ago. And now that I think about it, there is a level of where like my phone does a little bit more of this today than it used to, because if I do things right in my calendar, then Waze or Google Maps will pop up with directions and say, hey, you need to, you know, you need to leave a certain time and here's your directions. It really actually already is there. Although I think in this case, because I was on a mental autopilot without someone like shaking me and saying, you're not going to the same place you always go to, I probably still would have ignored ignored my device
Right.
and
So
just gone to the wrong airport.
right. So basically, kind of what happened was you had a set destination that you typically went to, but this time you booked it at a
Hmm.
different one.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
so you just started driving towards the one that you normally went to
Yep.
based off a habit in history. But
Yep.
really, you should have been into another airport because you actually
Hmm.
took a ticket from another airport
And I missed my flight.
and you
Yeah.
missed your flight.
I got rebooked later in the day, so I did not miss my sister's wedding because that was all what this was for. But it was, you know, but that was kind of, I remember sitting there in the airport thinking like, if I had had like an assistant that could really help me, not just carry my data around, but actually interact with me in a way to help me, that's kind of what I need.
Wow, that's interesting. So I would say that what it should have done, and this is I think what you actually experience is doable now. And I think basically where that comes from, and I've worked on AI at some
Mm-hmm.
notable companies before, previously in the past. But like I think basically what it should have done is had some historical data about you.
Mm-hmm.
Some historical data that you typically went to, these other locations. But as a reminder, it needs to differentiate. Hey, look, it needs to be able to feed in the new information in the old in the historical information to learn, just like a human would, kind of in a way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we're not gonna like when you meet a person, you don't automatically know that person's behavior, right? You have to kind
Right.
of get to know them for a
Right.
while to get smarter and kind of learn their behaviors. Like
Mm-hmm.
you date somebody or whatever it may be, you learn how they think and how they do typical things.
So I agree that some amount of that learning is definitely possible today, but I think the part though is how, what I don't think is quite possible today is the guaranteeing that the AI could connect with me, could inform me. Because I mean, like, you know, there's like 1,000 notifications on my phone all the time. I ignore most of them. You know, so just having another notification, is something that would be ignored. I need something that can be like like interactively proactive, not wait for me to ask it anything, and not just put up a little light or a little notification, but something that could like maybe the AI can actually give me a phone call and say, hey, no, really, I need to talk to you. We need to talk about this. You need to know what's going on. You know, something along those lines, which is not something I think. It's not to say that we don't have the ability to program it.
I think what you're saying is morely like
Yeah.
the way of doing it, right? The
Hmm.
execution of actually doing it in a way that's not a noisy way that we typically have right now. For example, text
Right.
messaging, or push. typically can get really noisy, or even email, right?
Hmm.
Those things are just like,
Right.
it's bombarded by noise. So it's like, how do you get rid of the noise, and how do you make it a more of a seamless experience where it's like
Hmm.
almost like a part of you? Maybe that's Neuralink, right? Maybe Neuralink is the
Yeah.
thing that does that and solves that problem for us. I mean, I think you'd have to actually get that implant it for you to try it out, but maybe that's the thing that does it.
I'm not yet ready to become a cyborg like that myself.
Why not?
I'm just not ready. Maybe when when I'm a little older.
What's your fare?
I don't know. Well, it's the funny things because there's definitely someone, I'm very interested in technology and all these things, but there's definitely a few irrational things. I think you found one, similar to like the whole concept of self-driving cars, which I love. I can't wait for them to become a thing. I hope they become a thing before my own kids are ready to drive. Yet, as someone who's been driving herself for 30 years, you're not taking away my car key. I'm driving myself, So yeah, which is completely irrational, right? I should let the car drive for me because it makes so much sense in so many ways. But I drive,
This is true,
and when we go anywhere as a family, I drive.
and that's fine. But also, it could be things of habit, right? And it also
Hmm.
could be a thing of like, you just enjoy driving, and not, and it's a habit. It's a habit type of thing where you've kind of got used to just driving and having control. And now we're talking about
Hmm.
letting go of that control, letting a machine take over,
Hmm.
right? There's a vulnerable state to let a machine just drive you somewhere. So we're not used to that.
Although I'm okay to let my kid. Yeah, I'd rather it drive my kids and teach my kids how to drive
Oh, but you just don't
because
want.
that's scary.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I want to drive myself.
Yeah, you just like driving.
I do. I really do.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I like driving too. I like just the drive. It's fun, right?
Hmm.
But I
Right.
think, like, maybe the future children of or your kids example may not even like driving.
Well, and that's interesting because my older son is 11 now, and I think when he was like 8, we were talking about it one day, and he had no interest in ever learning how to drive because it meant he couldn't do other things. He couldn't play on couldn't play a video game on a device or something like that because he's, watching me drive his whole life. He knows that you can't do anything else. And so he had made a comment about not wanting to learn to drive, wanting to let the car drive for him because so then he was free to do something else. I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason why
Yeah.
I don't like to drive long distance, is because I
Mm.
want to do something else. You know?
See, and I think the reason why I'm the one who likes to drive is because I always got motion sickness, so I couldn't read or I couldn't really do much else. So that's why one of the reasons I like to drive because I don't get motion sickness and can't really do anything. So
Uh
I'd rather be doing something.
Adina, maybe it has to do with your suspension. Did you get your suspension checked out? Make sure you're not like
Oh,
bouncing around like roughly. Look, what do you like? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we're talking because for the last since I've been a driver, I pretty much drive all the time. So we're talking like 30 plus years ago.
Oh yeah, suspension is
um,
probably definitely different.
yeah,
It depends on what vehicle you drove. Like, every car has a
yeah,
different suspension. Like,
that's true.
doesn't matter how expensive the car is. All cars
Hmm.
have different types of suspension. So depending on how that suspension is set up, it could be a shaky ride. Like, I know, in my vehicle, like people say in my back seat, it tends to make them a little bit more motion sick.
Interesting.
But the people that drive in the front don't feel this. But
Hmm.
I've also heard from friends who used to sell cars, and they say, "Hey, your vehicle in this model, even though it is a BMW, they're like, hey, the back seats have been prone to give people a bumpy ride, which would
Hmm.
most likely give you motion sickness, right? So I think it has a
I've
lot to
never
do
thought
with
about that.
the shocks in the vehicle, being the tires being balanced, also the terrain, right? The
Hmm.
rougher the terrain, the what do you call them, the suspension in general. If that
Hmm.
suspension is not a really good suspension, or it's kind of old, it needs to be properly maintenance properly, consistently. That can also increase it too.
Interesting. Maybe my parents didn't take care of their cars when I was a kid. That's why I always got sick.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't know. Like, were your parents? Did your parents ever work in a mechanical shop or anything else like that? Or
No, my grandfather was a mechanic, but no, my parents no.
yeah, Yeah, you got to know that stuff because sometimes you'll go there and people won't teach you this stuff. It's like the
Yeah.
same thing where you go to, you're working on satellites. That there's different things. There's pros and cons to building a satellite, that can make it, smoother, right? Or work more efficient, right? And some of them might not be as efficient as the others, right? I mean, we were using, before what Elon Musk, from what I understand, we weren't using reusable rockets, right? Now we are, right? So that
Right.
experience totally changed things. But if you're not up on what's the latest or what things you should be looking for to check and change, you might still experience that old history of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And this is kind of reminding me that I actually have to take my own car in for service. I keep getting the little warranty notices.
See? You got to do that. Yeah. If the
I do.
If the engine's rattling and stuff like that, that could cause the.
My current car feels fine, but I keep getting the notices, saying we got all these little warranty things. Got to make an appointment and come in.
I mean, some of those can be just triggers for you to get in there to spend more money, but
Oh.
your suspension. Your suspension is another thing that can easily cause problems depending on the terrain and depending on the shocks and the tires being balanced and things like that. That can all cause the car to shake. I did when I was a teenager. I did work at a tire place, right? I worked at a National Tire and Battery because I wanted to learn about cars, So I was like, oh yeah, let me do that. And I learned a lot about suspension. I almost got my finger chopped off, but I did learn a bunch about suspension, and I did learn a lot about balancing wheels and tires and how that affects the car ultimately.
Cool. Hopefully, the fact that you have all your fingers, I think, is you learned how to keep them on too.
Well, I mean, that happened because I was like literally training a new guy who was like taller and bigger than me. And, I told him, hey, look, we have to balance the tire off this truck. And we had to use this extra like type of adapter mount. And then we you have to make sure it's tight. And then you put the little hood over it and then you push the button and it tells you if it's balanced. And then if it's not, then you put extra weights on it. And, that fit the actual amount of weight you need to balance the actual tire, because this tire wobbling can cause your car to have, shake, which would, contribute to your motion sickness. And so if you don't get that properly checked, or even just a tire itself, certain tires are cheaper than the other tires. Certain tires can get warped. Certain tires can wear down further than others if you don't constantly get your tires rotated. All these things can contribute to your ride experience and can cause you to shake. And then also the make of the vehicle. Yeah, gotta look it up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, you got to apply that satellite knowledge to your vehicle.
I just want my vehicle to just work and get me where I need to go.
See, that's why I think you probably need a Tesla. I think you need a Tesla. I think those are the closest thing that do that, where they self-diagnose itself and tell you when you kind of need service and what, and what's not good.
Yeah, I definitely need that. But then I need to drive itself to the service.
I think they have some, some of them are testing the full autonomy right now, and beta testing. So some of them are close. So
yeah. Well, so the car can go without me, so it can go to its service appointment, so I can do my own thing, work on work or with my kids or work on my writing, and the car can go and take care of itself and come home and be all good.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lyft is actually trying out full autonomy in certain cities, Miami and Texas. They're using a hybrid system through another company I'm not going to mention, but yeah,
Cool.
they're not using Tesla. They're using their own little technology that they've made partnerships with. But they're testing out full autonomy in those two cities, Austin and Miami. So yeah, if you're in those areas, you could definitely take advantage of that.
I am not in those areas. I'm in Maryland, but no, but it's great that this kind of stuff is coming. I am very excited for all kinds of new technologies. I mean, seeing so much of it, like just in the last 20, 30 years has been amazing. And I'm very excited for the next 10, 20 years.
Really? Are you?
Yeah.
I kind of feel like we're a little bit late. I feel like we've been lazy.
No.
Where are our hoverboards, right? Where are our flying cars? We're still driving on wheels.
But all the things that we didn't even imagine, and we were kids and imagining the hoverboards and flying cars, right? We were not imagining cell phones. We were not imagining this kind of face-to-face community. Well, okay, we were imagining a little bit of the face-to-face communication over computers. But I mean, look at what has, and I think of it in terms of when I think about the childhood experience my kid is having in a world where he does not know a world without the internet. He doesn't know a world without cell phones. And comparing that to, those of us who grew up in the 80s, pre-internet, pre-cell phone. I mean, like, I learned how to drive with no cell phone. My parents sent me out of the house in a car to who knows where with no way to get a hold of me. I cannot imagine that with my own kid, I mean, like, I barely let him, go to his friend, walk down the block to his friend's house, without a cell phone to, so I can get a hold of him.
No, I could
Yeah.
totally understand. I mean, I was around long enough to where I saw like older technologies existing.
Mhm.
People, grandparents using those old phones that you would stick your finger in and you spin it around, and you're like, "What
Mhm.
the hell is this?" And then you have
That was our
cell
phone when we were growing up.
phones, and then you have the press pads, you have the VHS, you have the Beta Maxes, right? You had
Mhm.
now you had the DVDs, and now it's just
Before DVDs were,
downloading.
VHS.
Yeah,
And before
Betamax. Yeah.
VHS, I mean, I remember when we got our first VCR. I mean, like, I remember a time you did not pause. There was no pause on TV. That didn't exist. And the ability to record your program. Again, I remember the before time when this stuff did not exist. And so, yeah, it's a very different experience. So I think so much has changed, and we have so much more than we did. Even if it's not the exact things that we might have wanted, we've got so much.
I agree. We have so much, but I feel like I don't know. I just feel like, that we don't have so much as what we
Drones.
were drones. I mean, we should have been made drones. I feel like drones are like something we could have done a long time ago. We just didn't do it, right? I feel like
Mhm.
cell phones are something that we could have did a while back ago, but we just didn't do it. I feel like there's just like technology that's released to a small sect of people, and they know it, and then they wait a long time before they release it out to the mass public.
Well, so cell phones, so there were mobile phones for a while, and they were very expensive. I mean, cell phones were really enabled once basically the processors that we can use. I mean, that there was kind of like a cliff when that really became available. So no, I think that stuff kind of really went very quickly once the technology was there. And I want to say a fairly early adopter of cell phones. I mean, I had my like little brick cell phone back in, I think I got my first one in 1997, and it was just a phone. It's just a phone, nothing else. And it was a little brick. It was a very inconvenient, but it was just a phone, and then, the whole concept of the smartphones, again, once processing power became more widely available and cheaper and all that, well, we all have our smartphones now.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I still feel like, there's some major things that haven't been done. And, when it
Yeah.
comes to transportation, and there's so many different things that need to be explored, like
Hmm.
I'm kind of tired of the freaking wheel. Like, why haven't we thought of something different from the wheel now? Like, we're still using the wheel. The wheel is just like so old. It's like, I understand if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. But it's like, we're 2021. Should we be doing something else?
Mm, but it's not. I don't think it's a matter of, if it's not broke, don't fix it, because we certainly do have all kinds of advancements. I think it's a wheel.
I mean, it is just a wheel. I mean, we've been
I mean,
rocking the
we've been
wheel for
using it for
thousands
literally
of
for
years.
thousands of years, thousands of
Yeah.
years.
We're
Yeah, I think
2021. We got cell
there's a good
phones.
reason for that.
I agree. I think we can argue there's a good reason for a lot of things that existed in the past. But I feel like now we should be disrupting a lot more things than we are. I think we're doing it.
Hmm.
I think without guys like Elon Musk, who have the ability and
Hmm.
influence to be able to push those initiatives, there wouldn't be that much progress, right? A lot of the progress in the now, or even in the past, were done by these certain individuals with these certain personality traits that had the buy-in and the experience to be able to get people to lead. I mean, to lead them and to follow them within their wacky ideas, right?
Hmm.
And those people have changed, society. They've changed the world for people, because I feel like other than that, other people won't. They get their money. I don't need to innovate anything else. The wheel works, man.
Hmm.
You know, I'm fine. Let's just
Hmm.
take vacations and travel around the world. We're good. We don't need to do anything. As long as I got my cash and I made it, doesn't matter. Small inventions or innovations in general. And
Hmm.
nothing as big as, like, that's why you got guys like Elon Musk, who just came in and said, hey, look, we're going to Mars. we're going to make a
Mhm.
reusable rocket. Why the hell wasn't that done before? Like, yeah,
Right. Well,
science didn't meet
yeah.
it, right? But like, what else?
Well, it's a lot of it is economics, and if you can't truly prove the return on investment, then there's a lot of folks who are not interested, which is wonderful. Which makes it wonderful that a lot of these guys are willing to just put their own money in and not worried about the return on investment. And so we see a lot of the success stories from that. So we see SpaceX in their rocket, we see Tesla in the car. What we don't see actually is a lot of the money that they invest on stuff that doesn't work out so well, or that might have small improvements in some technology that's not as big or earth shattering. Elon Musk, he announces all the time like grand ideas and all these things he wants to do, and he puts money into all these things, and then sometimes we never hear about him again because they didn't pan out. And that's still just as awesome, the fact that he's willing to try. And it's not just him, the fact that there's a lot of these like ultra mega wealthy people that are willing to put their own money. Not only Richard Branson. One of my favorite guys is Paul Allen. He was a co-founder of Microsoft.
Yeah, yeah.
He passed away a few years ago, but his the company that he started, Vulcan, invests in a whole bunch of technologies, and it's his estate, it's still ongoing. And yeah, it's fantastic, because that's kind of what we need. Is we need people who are like not going to worry about the bottom line, the return on investment, but are just going to do it just to do it. And like I said, it's great, because it's gonna continue to spur all kinds of spin-offs, and just encourage other people to do it, encourage competition, all the good stuff.
I agree. You need to have some funding for sure. You need to have a lot of funding
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
initiate that risk, right? To mitigate that. But I believe that it doesn't. I mean, I believe your ability to have experience or a track record to have done these awesome things previously in the past, increases your efficiency to be able to raise that capital. That's one thing
Mhm.
that you have in Silicon Valley. You can be this brainiac, you can be this person who's great at inventing things, but to a small, certain small group of friends, or to whatever it may be, a smaller group of people in general. But when it comes to wanting to go to Mars, you need to have had a big win in the previous past. And sure, they do take major risks by throwing all their money in, but I would go against the fact that it is a risk that they're throwing all their money in. But at the same time, when you're a guy who sold a company like PayPal, your
Mhm.
street cred is pretty high. And so really throwing out $250 million, is that death for you? You know?
Well, no, it's still, but the fact that he's still, whether or not that's true, the fact that he's still willing to do it, because he doesn't have to. I mean, like, he could do anything with his money, right? And the fact that he's willing to do this, I think, is amazing. And of course, yes, success builds upon success for sure, right? So when he says, "I'm going to go to Mars," it again, we believe him because of everything that he's been able to do so far, right? But okay, even if he was someone who came along with a lot of money and hadn't done it before, the fact that because again, it's also not just him. He's building a team of people to help get him there. And I have in the industry, there's a lot of movement around of just engineers working at different companies. So I've had friends who worked at SpaceX. I've had friends who work at Blue Origin and stuff. And a lot of it is also having the idea, willing to put the money in, but also being able to build a team of people that could actually execute. And I think that's something that shouldn't be underestimated, because you could have a great idea, you could have money, but if you don't get the right people to help, because you're not doing this, you're not the one actually doing this yourself. It is that team of people that you build.
Right. And I totally agree with
Yeah.
that. I agree with that. I agree with you 100%. But I will throw something back in there. I will throw something back in the
Mhm.
sand. I'll throw some Mars sand back on it. And what I'm saying is, Adina, is I agree, but
Mhm.
what I'm saying is that a guy like Elon Musk, he doesn't have to put his money there.
Nope.
But a guy like Elon Musk has to put his money there. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that
I see
is
what you're saying.
a guy
Yeah.
like Elon Musk, there's certain people that have these certain principles in life, and things that they want to live by and want to stand for. And how do they want to exist? How do they want to be
Hmm.
remembered? Are they legacy driven?
Hmm.
Elon Musk,
Sure.
to me, is a person who is legacy driven. after you've reached so much amount of money, what else do you, what else can you, what can you do? Because you're going to die, right? Most likely you're going to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody dies right now, at least. So it's like, all right, so I've done these amazing things. I've raised this money. What else could I do? I could sit on the beach and spend all my money and hang out with whatever type of people you want to hang out with, or whatever you feel that fancies your heart. Maybe that's women for some people, maybe it's the same sex, whatever it may be. You can do that to an abundance. But does that to a type of personality trait like an Elon Musk, that feels empty. If I'm legacy driven,
Well,
I don't
sure.
really care about hanging at the beach.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think it's necessarily legacy driven. It's just a drive to do it. You have a certain personality type that isn't just going to sit there and twiddle your thumbs. Whether it's legacy or not. Because I get that too. The whole concept with people ask me about when do you find you have a full time job, have kids, all this. When do you find time to write? And part of it is like I have to. I can't just sit there and not. And so I think there's just some of that. A lot of people who are just driven to do whatever they need to do. They're just driven to do whatever they need to do. Paul Allen, he had an autobiography that he wrote a couple of years before he passed away called Idea Man, and he talked about these ideas and being a kid and wanting to do stuff with rockets and all this, and then once he was an adult and happened to have had this amazing thing with Microsoft and make a bunch of money, that he was able to go back and look at these dreams he had and be like, I can now try to fund this and try to actually make this a reality. And, again, any of these folks could just retire, sit on a beach, do whatever. But the same personality that drives them to succeed to begin with is the same personality that drives them to not just sit there, not just stop.
Yeah, I agree, Dina. I agree. But at the same time, I'm going to throw a little bit more Marsan on it. And I'm going to say, yes, you're right. I agree. But also, I'm going to add something in there. And what I'm going to add is that, there is this, like, you get to what I was saying before. You get to this point where you have all this money. You can do anything you want to do, anything you want to do in the world. You're a multimillionaire. You have $250 million roughly. What is it that life can't do for you with that amount of money? So it's like, what I've done all this. You're right. There's this drive. I've built this big company and I have all this money. And now it's just like, what do I do? It's like really about what do I do? And if you're that type of personality trait, when you're that type of personality type, you do have this pushed or drive or this mission to do something next. Because if you don't, you just feel like, you need to solve problems. You need to do something. And it's like, why not go revisit those things that you always wanted to do? Because what stops you from doing those things that you always wanted to do or following your dreams as a kid? It's money. So now when you get older, you've figured out, I mean, you've reached $250 million or you reach a success point where you've had a great exit in a company. People think you're a rock star. It's easy to assimilate amazing teams, right? Because you have the buy-in, right, of a track record now. Elon Musk to me could have never built, Tesla or SpaceX prior to PayPal. Right?
I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. So, and because, we definitely are in a culture of success breeds success for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's why I sit there and say to people when people say, oh, like, I don't really like when people say, well, this person is this person. I'm like, well, how do you know that, I could be that same freaking person. Right. But you don't know that until I've reached a level of excellence to be able to achieve or to execute those, because I could talk about all day long, like, hey, I want to go to Mars and I want to build, spaceships and, I want to get rid of the will. But who the hell's going to believe me when
Give me $1 billion and I'll show you what I can do.
Exactly. I mean, but you don't even need $1 billion. If you get one successful startup, like Elon Musk, I think he got I think if I'm correct, I think he got about 250 million.
There was something before PayPal, wasn't there?
He had some other smaller companies that he did, and he sold.
So, I mean, there's something that built that. Then he did PayPal, and there was a string of things.
Yeah, he had a smaller company. I think when he first came to Silicon Valley, he was like, I think he tried to work at one of the tech companies here. I don't know if it was Netscape or something else like that. I can't remember exactly. But
Netscape, that's a word I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah. And I think it was one of those companies. I think it was Netscape. I can't remember exactly. Don't quote me on that, but it was a company like that. It may have been Netscape. but he wanted to work there, but he stood in the lobby and he was just afraid. And he's like, oh yeah, well, I guess they probably wouldn't hire me. So let me just walk out here and build my own thing. And he built some type of company at the time. In that company, I think exited, and he brought himself some stuff. But I think that wasn't the company that catapulted him to be able to do SpaceX and etc. PayPal was the actual company, but I think that gave him like some extra funding to be able to execute his PayPal like idea, because he merged with PayPal. Actually, he had another company that merged to PayPal.
That might be what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when PayPal got acquired, and he was the CEO at PayPal at one time, but he was fired.
Yeah, that's bringing back some memory. I know I've read some stuff about his background, but I'm not recalling all of it right now.
Yeah,
it's all overshadowed by all the SpaceX stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens once you make
that's the only
massive.
Important thing.
Yeah, out of everything he's did in the past, this is the most important things, because he's changing the world. He's pushing things forward. But I guess what I'm just saying in general is like, how many great minds and how many people would do certain things like Elon Musk, but they just don't have, the buy-in. There's a lot of people who probably don't have the buy-in.
Oh, sure. Yes. Oh, absolutely. There are tons of people who would, if they could.
Yeah. You got to get that win.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks you're successful before you show them that you're successful. It's baby steps. And I just think there's just like these small slots in life or nodes that you have to reach in order to be able to get to the next level, to say something or to have a voice, to be able to be who you want to be. And I feel like Elon Musk, he took those steps and he achieved each one of those. He achieved each major node in his life, with accomplishments, and he used that to propel himself to the next node. And now he's a trillionaire, right? I think he's a trillionaire. I think they announced that this week or something. Yeah, he's like a trillionaire.
Really?
I think the thing is, Adina, he ended up, I think it was who is it? It was one of these recent companies ended up purchasing 100,000 of his vehicles like 2 days ago or something like that. And so now it pushed him up to be the valuation of $1 trillion. It's crazy.
That hurts my head, but
it's crazy.
But if he keeps funneling that money into SpaceX, then we're all good. It's all good.
No, he is. And now there's also talk about him, doing some type of stuff with the mobile phones, creating his own mobile device. And I think that's a push, at Apple, because, they didn't, he wanted to be the CEO of Apple. That didn't happen for him. So, they denied him that. And so I think he's kind of still have that. Okay, well, guess what? I'm going to get you again. And
do my own. Yeah.
And Apple was talking about building a car. He's like, yeah, come on. Good luck with that, But, I think deep inside, he's probably a little bit, fearful of Apple doing stuff like that. But because Apple is Apple. I mean, before Elon Musk, who was probably the biggest person before Elon Musk? It wasn't Zuckerberg, I would say. I think it was Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, in terms of, personality in a tech industry. Yeah, Steve Jobs for sure. I mean, Bill Gates in a way, but not the same way that Steve Jobs.
No.
Yeah.
That's the certain type of personality that allows you to be able to innovate and motivate others, and then also sell it.
Yeah.
And execute it and make it happen.
Yes,
make people believe
Steve
something
Jobs.
they can't grab.
I can't think of anyone else besides him.
Nah, Steve Jobs was. I mean, before Elon Musk, it definitely was Steve Jobs. He was the Elon Musk of 10 years ago, right? Or for maybe 20 some odd years, right? I mean, even further. I mean, once he came up with the iPhone, the Macintosh, all those things like that, those things changed the world. I mean, that's all I use.
I'm on the PC and Android.
It's because you're a developer.
Side of the universe.
It's because you're a developer. Developers love the PCs. What type of what mobile device are you rocking?
An Android. I have a Samsung Android.
See?
Yeah.
I already knew it. I know my types of personality traits. Yeah. So typically developers will always 9 times out of 10 have a PC and an Android device. Right. And they typically might want to drive their own cars. What is it?
That's fair. Yeah.
And then you have your product people who like Macs, right? Designers and graphic people, they typically will like your Macs. They will like, they don't want to work on, the computer that much. They don't want to customize stuff. They just want it to work. It's about efficiency, not really about, hey, look what I can do though. I have more control and I can do this and I can call up this command and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That definitely is accurate with the people that I know who are who are graphics artists and designers. And
What type of PC do you have?
I just have right now a Dell. I specifically bought one a little over a year ago. It was one of my pandemic purchases to get a new computer so that was VR capable. So I have a VR headset. And
Awesome. Do you
yeah.
like VR?
Yes. Oh, I love it. It's actually it's kind of one of my side hobbies at my day job too.
Oh,
Is I have a little VR lab. Although we've had some, again, with the pandemic and being, working from home, it's a little bit different. But yes, I love VR.
that is crazy. What do you think the future of VR is going to look like?
I think as the headsets get more wearable, I think that's the big thing that needs to change, because right now you can't wear it for too long without it getting very uncomfortable and, being heavy on your neck and your head and your eyes. So I think the technology has to improve to make it more wearable. But as that happens, I think it'll become more common. I know, of course I have it at home and we, play games and it's a lot of fun, but at work we actually use it it's kind of like a design or an engineering tool. And again, I think as people get used to it and that they see that how wonderful it is to be able to see what you're building before you build it, that's a very important thing. So I think it's going to increase in popularity over the next few years.
Yeah, or AR might take over that. I don't
Mhm.
know. But I mean,
Yeah.
what type of VR headset are you using? Are you using like
So
Facebook's Oculus? What are you doing?
no, I personally have the HTC Vive. And long story why I chose that over Oculus, um, but yeah, I've a HTC Vive.
Cool. Doesn't your head
Yeah,
get like I get headaches when I put on the
I don't get headaches, but
dizzy?
the headset itself, it's kind of meaty. So it's not that it's a headache like from the eyes; it's more from the weight of it. So like on my neck and everything. So after a while, I just can't wear it anymore. Although what I have is one of the more recent generations. Like I had at work, we had used one from a few years ago, and it was heavier than the one I have now. So
Wow.
they're getting better, and as they get better, I think, like I said, it'll become more popular.
Yeah, for me, I always got dizzy, and I've only tried
Mhm.
Oculus previously in the past, and I just got dizzy, and I was like, dude, I have to take it off. This is like, hurting my eyes and my head. I got dizzy. I got motion sickness. I felt like I was in your
Well,
car.
so there are definitely reasons and ways that you'll get similar to the car. There's actually things that will cause you to get motion sickness in
See how I
VR.
dropped that in
Um,
there?
yeah, related to your frame rate and just different things there. I'm also prone to motion sickness in the VR if certain things are, like, if there's a scenario where you're on a roller coaster, I'm gonna it's gonna make me feel a little wonky. And we play around, the stuff that I do at my job. So we're looking at a satellite in VR, and we have ways to like fly above the satellite so you can see it from all like ends. And some of that flying stuff gets me really easily. I don't do the flying.
You hear that, kids? Don't do the flying. All right.
If you don't want to get motion sickness.
There you go. That is what it is. So, what are some other things that that you're interested in as far as like skills? I mean, I got you with
God, everything.
VR. I've got you with children's robot books, and yeah, and your satellites. What else?
Mhm. Oh gosh. Well,
Boston
I mean,
Dynamics. What are we
anything
doing?
related to space, computers, astronomy, which is, it's just so expansive. I mean, like I have some hobbies that have like nothing to do with any of that, um, but in all of that, just I don't know. To me, a lot of it merges together. Like the science fiction feeds the science fiction, and it kind of circles in and on itself. Yeah,
Astronomy.
um, yeah.
Astronomy. What interests you about astronomy?
Well, it's all part of the space stuff. When I went to college, most people kind of with an interest in space like I had would have majored in aerospace engineering. But at the time that I was starting college, I was very nervous about majoring in that. And then, like, well, what if the industry isn't doing so well and I want to work in space? I don't want to work in aero. And so I was worried about just practically getting, a job when I graduated. And I decided to major in physics instead. My high school physics professor, who at the time he was in his 60s, and his degrees were in physics. And in the course of his life, he had done like all these different things. And so I looked at that, I'm like, if I major in physics, I'm not locking myself into like one narrow career thing. So I did that, but then my university also had a major in astronomy, and to me that was like where I was getting my space, you know. So I did physics and astronomy to get all the space stuff.
Yeah, I had actually Avi Loeb, an astrophysicist from Harvard. He was actually on the show before,
Mhm.
and we just talked about a bunch of really cool stuff. And he was all about really trying to find those next generation of physicists, right? And really trying to get them interested in into the whole field. But like, what are some of the skill sets or some of the industry professions that you feel the future is going to be more in demand of?
Well, I think everything, anywhere we have a demand for people who can program, there's computer programming literally everywhere. So I think, if folks are looking, what skills should I have, is to learn how to program. Because that kind of leaves you open to any other interest you have. So I tell people, I mean, again, if you're interested in astronomy, learn how to program, but do astronomy, because there's programming in astronomy. If you are interested in like biomedical stuff, that's awesome, but learn how to program, like have that kind of as a core skill, the way we would have a core skill of reading or understanding math. I think programming should be a core skill for anybody. To that end, I don't necessarily recommend that people major directly in computer science, um, unless they are interested fundamentally in the computers themselves. To me, it's better learn how to program and learn some other thing that you're interested in, and then do that. But so I know this doesn't quite answer what you said, but I think just a core skill to anything is programming, because you can do from there anything.
Right, right. So programming, yeah, I agree with you.
But for any other science, of course, it's always, easy to say that math is kind of generally obvious if you're going into any kind of science, to pay attention to math, but don't underestimate, reading and writing. Most of my job as an engineer these days is all about communicating with the written word and communicating to people in meetings. It is, again, crucial skill to be able to communicate with my fellow engineers and customers and just everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you too, but like that's also like more of like public speaking, being able to communicate effectively, which is a skill set that you have to grow and learn from. Some of us get it
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more natural, but having the ability to win over your stakeholders, having the ability to, get that buy-in is massive in the world. So maybe it's a hybrid of sales, right? Marketing, code, right? Developing, right? Maybe it's also a hybrid of whatever else you want to like study as far as like the core focus, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
in astronomy or whether it's in robotics or satellites or whatever it may be, but having those four or five extra components that I mentioned previously.
Mm-hmm. Well, and people think of, you mentioned public speaking. I know a lot of people will think of that as getting up in a room full of people, and that's not always just to make sure people understand, that is not always the case. It really could be a meeting of you're one of 4 or 5 people, but you might be that person amongst those 4 or 5 people who really understand. Like, you might have 4 people, and there's 2 different things they're talking about, or 2 different sides of an issue that they're talking about, and you might be that person who's helping them communicate. And that's actually one of the situations I find myself in quite a bit at work. Is I have different groups of people on my team, and they're coming at a problem from different perspectives, and they aren't necessarily seeing each other's side of it, and I'm there to help them do that.
Right. You
So
kind of
yeah,
facilitate that,
communicating is
mediated
important.
that. Yeah, yeah, I totally
Mhm.
agree with that. Communication is very important because if you can't communicate whatever you're trying to build or execute, it really makes it difficult in the workplace to actually do that,
Mhm.
right? Because you
Yeah.
can't formulate or collectively grab and embrace that idea to the others, to where it makes sense. And if you're a bad communicator, it kills the whole team effort, right? Collaborations help
Mhm.
ideas execute, right?
Mhm.
So I totally agree with that. That's really massive. But a lot of people don't know that. They don't teach you that in school, how
No.
important communication is, how important
There
communication is.
Yeah, I've always heard, there's some lip service paid to it, but I think people don't really appreciate what it's not lip service. It's a real thing. And especially, most of our work, so much of our work is done over email, written email. Having a clear email. I can't tell you how many emails I get that are not clear. Like, what are you actually asking? You spent time writing an email, but I'm not really sure what you're saying or asking me to do. So it's really important.
No, totally. I definitely agree. I mean, that's why there's so many different fields within, even in the tech world where you have your copywriters, right? People who just focus on actually the writing. That's their expertise. Your UX
Mhm.
researchers, those are the people who are, researching the actual experience, right? You have a bunch of these type of things. Then the designers, then you have your project
Mhm.
managers. So, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but there's certain special skill sets that need to, come together to build like an
Mhm.
actual product. And I think a lot of people really they underestimate these things, but being able to communicate, I think, is a core component for any field, along with
Yes.
code or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
You got to have that, man.
Yeah.
It's so important, man, especially with TikTok
Yeah.
going on.
But I think your original question about getting people interested in some of this stuff, I think, by just, watching it happen, watching all the different space missions that are happening these days, it's very exciting. When James Webb launches in a couple months, uh, it's going to be like it's this generation's Hubble Space Telescope. When Hubble launched and started taking pictures, and we started seeing the pictures, that was revolutionary. That was amazing. And I think James Webb is going to be something very, very similar. And I'm hoping things like that is what gets people excited. I'm hoping things like, so SpaceX's recent Inspiration 4 mission, that was the one where they had the 4 people, quote unquote regular people, spend a few days in space, in orbit. I mean, hopefully watching missions like that, hopefully following along with NASA's return to the moon, uh, all these things I'm hoping will get people excited about the wide array of space science stuff that's out there.
I agree with you, and I think like I was thinking about something just briefly too as well. Once you were mentioning all these amazing things, it's like if we're thinking about extraterrestrials, and we're thinking how far they could possibly be out in technology, which most likely I tend to believe way ahead of us. And you think
Mhm.
about you know things like we just discussed previously, which was like hey, I haven't seen any no references of them, and it's just like when you're doing something different and you might be so far along in technology, would we be able to detect them? To an
Mhm.
extent, like, because I think we think of things of of our way of doing things, and that's how we try to validate, you know, uh, uh, things of existence or things
Mhm.
in reality, right? So, for example, if we say, flying saucers, aliens, like we need to see something enter our planet, right? Passing our ozone layer and coming in, right? But at the same time, if you are a civilization that may be millions or even billions or even thousands of years ahead of us, maybe they don't use spaceships or vehicles the same way we do. Maybe they
Mhm.
have a different technology to where this is just like prehistoric,
Sure.
right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I've definitely thought along those lines, and I also think that any if there is any extraterrestrial civilization out there, and they are advanced enough to visit us in some way, shape, or form. Um, I am boiling this down. I am simplifying this a little bit. It's probably not this simple, but I see two scenarios. One, they either do not want us to know about them, like do not, or two, they do. And so this is why I don't believe that we've been contacted, because or that there's any chance that some of these quote unquote sightings or anything are actually extraterrestrials, because either they want us to know that they're there, and they would have made it beyond clear. They wouldn't have just there wouldn't be these little potential blips that have gone away, or they don't want us to know, in which case we would not have seen a gosh darn thing because they're so advanced there's no way. And that's very like black and white, and there's probably like a lot of ways to pick that apart, and I've done that in my own head, too. But it's kind of why I think that if they are out there, we have no indication that they are, not
Or
yet.
or maybe Adina, maybe also, I mean, and we can go on about those, of course, right? But also maybe Adina, maybe it's funner just to observe and watch. and maybe
Mhm.
it's funner just to, you know, not disturb things, right? And not to cause havoc. Because when you think about humans, and if you studied them long enough, or if you had some type of like intermingling with them throughout their history of growth, do you come in
Mhm.
and just say, hey, look, we're here, we created you, and it disrupts the whole vibe and energy of all these people? People start going, imagine
They
humans
have a prime
all
directive, like in Star Trek.
maybe imagine humans declaring that, or us all, saying, hey, look, aliens exist, and we all see them,
Mhm.
and they're coming down to the White House. What would happen to our culture?
Oh, it'd be chaos.
Yeah. What happens to religion?
Today it would be chaos.
What happens to religion?
Mhm.
How many suicides do we have? How many people depressed? How many people going to work?
Mhm. Yeah.
It was just, to me, it would disrupt everyone. Look what COVID did. How many
Mhm.
people quit their job? Now we want to bring aliens, and and they want to come in and say, hey guys, we exist, and there's actually
Mhm.
millions of us more. If you're an extraterrestrial, civilization that's highly intelligent, you might know that you just can't do it that way. It's
Mhm.
just like busting in a wedding and saying, hey, look, I hooked up with 5 other guys before I'm going to marry you. Are you cool? Do you need to
Mhm.
know that? I don't know if that's
Right.
something you want to intersect. You might have to just hide certain things and play on a level of which humans can tolerate, which may be
Mhm.
through manipulation, coming down and helping certain, influencing certain events on, Earth, and only interacting with certain individuals, supporting certain individuals, pushing things into certain individuals to help them reach heightness or spirituality or whatever it may be. Maybe it just might be just fun to watch this like freaking TV.
Right.
Maybe I'm bored and my reality TV is people. Maybe I'm freaking bored. I mean, is it too far to think that maybe we just might be a good TV station?
It's possible. I
Truman
feel like
Show?
I feel like that was like a Futurama episode, but
Truman Show did it too, yeah, right?
oh, well, yeah, yes, humans watching humans. But I feel like in Futurama there might have been like extraterrestrials watching us, our reality show.
But wouldn't that be
But
awesome?
that reminds me,
But wouldn't that be awesome? And wouldn't that be something like entertainment, like our form of entertainment? We're just now getting to reality TV, right? In the
Mhm.
past 10 some odd years, right?
Right.
Or MTV first started it out and start trying some things off 20 years ago, per se. But really, it kicked in within the last 10 years. So imagine a civilization to where we just get at a point where it's just like we're bored. Maybe we just want to watch other things we might manipulate or create and see how it works, and do some things every once in a while to check in on them, and but not go ahead and just crash the party. Then we lose the whole entertainment value.
Yeah.
Or they kill
Yeah.
themselves, right?
Yeah.
I just don't think I don't think aliens could actually do what we want them to do. If they're really intelligent and smart, I don't think they would
Oh,
do
no,
that.
no. Yeah, there is no way we would have any again, for a civilization that's advanced enough to interact with it, to come here and interact with us, we had no control over
And we wouldn't
what
be
they
able
would do.
I just think we wouldn't be able to handle them emotionally, mentally, spiritually right now. We're just not there.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a
As
point
yeah.
maybe there's a point in life or in existence to where we reach a certain level of technology where they say, okay, I think they're safe now. We can talk
Mhm.
to them, or maybe there's never
Mhm.
any intentions to really just letting them all know, but play little
Mhm.
games. Maybe it's fun, like your little
Mhm.
brother or your little sister playing games on you and pranking you as a kid. Maybe it's just freaking fun. Hey, let's go out and visit them.
Yeah.
Hey, Charlie, we're here. Oops, we don't exist. And oh, did you? I saw aliens. And you're like, nobody saw them, dude. You're crazy. No, I really did. They came in there. They wanted to have kids with me. Really? Okay. And they're just laughing on the side, like, yeah, did you see what happened? Yeah, that's hilarious.
Mhm.
I mean, I just think we think too hard about aliens, and I think we think of it in a way too much like how humans would think things would go down. And it may just be a more simplistic view of things, or a more complicated view of things than what we're thinking of.
Sure. Well, we only have ourselves to model after, right? Until we actually someday meet extraterrestrials and know what they are actually like. Yeah, we don't have anything else to go on but ourselves.
But specifically,
So,
if we
yeah.
meet extraterrestrials as a whole, not to 1 or 4 or 5 or a certain
Sure,
sect of people,
sure.
because nobody's going to believe it, right? It doesn't exist until everybody agrees.
Just because people don't agree doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
You're right, but to us, Like, for
Hmm.
example, those people who said they have, been visited, we don't agree that that's a fact because we
True.
haven't all
Okay.
agreed on
Yes,
that.
that is true. So we don't know. We don't know.
Facts are based on a group of, a large group of people agreeing to some extent. Even though that's not 100% truth, that's how we
Yeah.
kind of like, that's how we solidify facts.
Hmm. Well, the whole concept of, I mean, yes, I agree with that. But in the cases of the people claiming that, they've had contact, yeah, we just can't verify. So we can't verify their assertion.
Right.
So that's kind of the problem. That doesn't mean, so it is, and again, I'm not the person who's going to tell them that they're wrong or they didn't, because I don't know, because I don't know. It's one of those things that something happened or it didn't, right? That there is truth there, whether or not we know the truth. Those are two different things.
Right. And I just think it's something that I think that they wouldn't directly come about and just start telling us all collectively.
Hmm.
Like, I think Elon Musk, he had said one thing on one, I'm going to bring him up again, but I think he said something on a Joe Rogan podcast recently where he said, if aliens exist, they're very subtle. He's like, they're really subtle. They're very subtle. If they want us to know that we're here, all they have to do is just, come in, Times Square or whatnot. Right. And just say, hey, look, we're here. But I think that's a naive way of thinking of it, because like, would a complex civilization just do that? Why would they do that?
Hmm.
They know that would just destroy the fabric of humans. Would not be able to handle it. We can't handle
Well,
COVID.
right. That's why we
Anti-vaxxers.
don't know. That's why there is the chances that there is another civilization out there that has the capability to come here, found out that we're here, and then came here, I think is very, very small. Like I'm convinced that there is other intelligent life in the universe, but the chance that there's other intelligent life that has all those other things, that has, that is advanced enough, that has found us, and that has come here, like very, 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 very small chance. But that's all opinion. Again, I have nothing to base that on other than opinion.
Right. And I think that's the magic of, if you are an extraterrestrial, is to keep that mystery there. It just makes you, they
For
don't,
now, until we're ready.
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be known. Like, I wouldn't want to be known
Mm.
by people. If you're smart enough to know people and you see
Today,
what we've
yeah,
done historically in our past,
yeah,
and
yes,
if you had some contribution to that, and that we believe in Earth, I mean, we believe in God, we believe in all these things that we believe in, and you come and disrupt that in any way, like, that just wouldn't be helpful for humans. I just don't
hmm
think the mental health can handle it. And I think they would be
hmm
smart enough to know that we're not able to
maybe,
handle something like you can't handle the truth.
maybe.
Maybe, maybe.
Yeah, there was a wonderful science fiction book I read a few years ago by John Scalzi called Agent to the Stars,
Yeah.
and it was about aliens recognizing, they wanted to be introduced, they wanted to meet us, but they recognized that was going to be very challenging, so they hired a Hollywood agent to help assist with their introduction to humanity. It's a real fun story.
That is hilarious. That looks like a great fictional book that could be added
Mhm.
into the whole catalog of robots.
Mhm. Well, again, John Scalzi wrote it, not me. It was great. It came out like 10, 12 years ago. It's called Agent to the Stars. Yeah. No, not
Yeah.
mine.
If
It's
I mean, there should be a book called "If I Was an Alien, What Would I Do?"
Mhm.
Like a hypothetical. Not something that everybody does as typical, because I feel like everybody comes into this whole alien thing as a typical perspective. Oh, if they're real, why don't they just show us? Okay,
Mhm.
that's not a critical thinking way of doing things. Of like, there's a lot of like pros and cons of just showing yourself to a bunch of humans.
Mhm.
We don't know what the reasoning would be, and what role did they have in the history with humans, right?
Mhm.
We don't know how they kind of operate. We don't know any of that stuff. But if
Right.
they
We know
exist,
absolutely nothing.
and if they exist, they would know obviously how we operate, most likely better than we would.
Well,
Vice versa,
maybe. Again, we
maybe.
don't know if they're so different. We don't know. Would it really truly be even possible to understand another species?
That's
Like
crazy.
we don't know,
Like an ant
because
from a
again,
frog.
we still think of things very, similar to ourselves. And so we still imagine, an alien species to be very similar to ourselves. If they're similar, we could probably figure each other out. But if they're so different, maybe we will never figure each other out. Maybe they don't understand us. They won't understand us. We don't know. The space is wide open for all these possibilities.
Sounds like a great song. The space is wide open. Yeah. No, I agree with you, Adina.
Mhm.
I think that's totally. There's a bunch of stuff to think about that. I just think when we come up to these debating, scenarios, we typically come up with these, these blanket statements of, oh, well, if they exist, why don't they just show us themselves?
Mhm.
Like it's really like, why would they just do
Mhm.
that? Like,
Mhm.
if you are
If
something
they
of that existing of that type, why would you just show yourself? If it
Yeah.
was that easy,
Well,
I
I would
don't know.
say if
Why
they
doesn't the government
existed,
just tell us all the secrets?
well,
Why doesn't the
sure.
government just tell us about the war on drugs? Like, why don't they just tell us
Mhm.
about a bunch of stuff in history? Why
Mhm.
does the upper elite hide so much stuff in history, and and have done so since the beginning of time? Why do they do these things? Why do they create these manipulating structures like race? Why does
Mhm.
colonialism exist? Why was that even created? It had some logic that was well thought out by groups of elites and said, hey, you know what, I'm bored. Why don't I just make up
Mhm.
something called race and
Well,
just choose people based off of certain phenotypes? I'm bored.
human logic, though. I mean, we're talking again.
Human
It's
logic
hard to
again?
compare,
Yes.
right? This is all human logic. We have no idea if alien logic would.
Even think like that.
Yeah, we don't know.
That's true. That's deep.
Yeah.
But I
The
think,
only part that I'm certain of is, look, if they exist, if they have the technology to come here, if they've found us, if they've been here, if at that point they wanted to be known and say, hey, here we are, they would, or they would have.
and I agree on
But there's a
that.
lot of ifs to get there.
Oh yeah. I agree
Yeah.
on that. And I just think there's so many different ifs, like you said, to get there. And I just think
Hmm.
that's where we should always stay, a gray area,
Hmm.
a gray area of
Until we
possibility
know.
and a gray area was like, nah, dismissal. It doesn't really exist.
Hmm.
But in the middle,
Until we know.
until
Until
we
we know
know.
more.
Until we know. Well, that's great. Thank you for coming on the show. I had a fun time. So, is there anything that you want to direct, some of the people listen to the podcast to directly on your behalf? Like book? What's
Well,
going on?
sure. If you like science fiction, particularly if you like humor science fiction, check out my book, Crazy Foolish Robots, on Amazon. It's while it's young adult accessible, it's not necessarily just for young adults. It's for anyone who likes humorous science fiction, likes to read about robots.
And why did you write the book again?
Oh gosh, because I love robots, because I love science fiction, because I have to write. Because I have to do it.
Awesome. The Terminator. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, thanks again for coming on the show. Just hang on
Thanks
for
for
a
having me.
second. Oh yeah, for sure. It definitely was fun talking to you. Just hang on for a second. We got to
Mhm.
make sure everything is uploaded on both sides. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Moo Faces TV. Let's go.